afternoon to everybody, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to present some of our thoughts on understanding of pension systems, the intergenerational differences in educational interventions for its promotion. And this is joint work together with my doctoral students Ronja Baginski and Merve Suna, as well as Susanne Frick from the Technical University of Dortmund, and Jana Schütz and Silke Übelmesser from the University of Jena. So I will start with setting the scene. Why is it so important, or why is pension literacy an important and relevant issue for financial education? Maybe in this room nobody would doubt it, but usually one has to argue why this is important. I will give some thoughts on the conceptual background, because we did it in a somewhat different way. We used a multi-dimensional approach towards pension literacy, and then I will go into the assessment and promotion of pension literacy by giving you some examples from our research. My presentation will be somewhat different. I will go more into the conceptual elaboration of this approach, why we did it the way we did it. So the technical part, of course, I'm willing to answer it in the data in the questions, but I will give you more an overview of our reasoning, why we did it in a specific way and why we wanted to align the assessment with the promotion. So why is it important? I think everybody knows that demographic change is leading to growing urgency for to reform pension systems, particularly in European countries, as there is an increasing old age, or part of the population is old age, and an increasing need for citizens to provide for their old age. So pension literacy is, for at the one hand, important at an individual level for personal financial decision making and pension planning. But, and I think this is equally important when it comes to citizenship education, for example, it's also important from a political point of view. As we experienced, for example, in France, but also some time ago in Italy and in many other countries, this is really, and when it comes to discussions about pension systems, these are very emotional discussions. So, and if people want to judge the reforms, and if politicians want to have informed people, people need some kind of understanding of the pension system. So our questions at the outset was, if it is important, how can we conceptualize pension literacy? How can we validly assess it? And if we have it once assessed and we know where the gaps are, how can educational interventions be designed to promote pension literacy? So let me start with the conceptualization. We did a literature review on different definitions, and we came out with a definition which you would acknowledge that it's very close to the definition of pension literacy, of financial literacy, because we are going to start to think in literacies. And I think financial literacy is such a broad area that we really need financial literacies. And so we are starting to roll out a little bit those literacy, and pension literacy is a kind of primer for us. So we think it's knowledge, skills, and attitudes that individuals have about pension systems, retirement planning, and the financial product and services related to pensions. That came out from our literature analysis, and some reflections also on competence-based approaches and competence-based assessment. So we have three pillars, so to say. Maybe in pension systems it's nice to have three pillars, even though these are not the pension pillars. But nevertheless, we think that it's pension system understanding, and that is the understanding how public and private pension systems work, including how different types of pensions operate, what contributions are required, how benefits are calculated, and how macro developments such as inflation and life expectancy impact them. So that's more about the context, so to say. Then you have the more personal part, the retirement planning, conceived as the ability to determine retirement income goals and the strategies and actions necessary to achieve them, including in identifying sources of income, estimating expenses, and all the processes that you need to have a valid estimation and a valid planning. And then, of course, the ability to judge different problems. So I will go into this one and of course come back to the other ones as well, because we were working on this part of the pillar and what we did. So our approach was informed by methodological reasoning from evidence-centered assessment design. How that's a kind of methodology how you should proceed if you want to design valid assessments. And we also used the so-called AERA from the American Educational Research Association. In 2014, they established standards that are needed to have validity claims for your assessment. So that you can say, okay, those are psychometrically valid and they are also reliable and fair and practical, because we wanted to use them in a large-scale assessment, and then of course we have some restrictions. They need to be practical as well as valid and reliable and fair, of course. So we used Germany because that's a country that we knew best, and that was also part of a project that was funded by the ministry, by the German Work and Social Affairs Ministry. So they were interested, of course, of the German situation, but we took it as again as a primer for how to go forward in developing such a test, that we call it the German Pension System Understanding Scale, that we wanted to construct. So we did some work that we delineated. I don't go into the details, but we can discuss that, of course, later on if you are interested in. We did a very systematic development, or we were very systematic in developing our scale. Then we started with expert interviews to validate the test content. We started with cognitive interviews to validate the response processes, if people respond in the way that we expected them to respond. And we continuously changed our test. So we started with a first version of the test, and during all these kinds of validation processes, then we did in our last study, we did a survey study with, where we later on calculated the internal structure, the relationship to other variables, the reliability, and so on. So we did it in a very structured manner, because we were interested in really having all those evidences to claim that we have a valid, reliable, and fair and practical measurement. So that's what we did. How did we, because we were also interested at the outset at connecting an educational reasoning with an assessment, because we work in the educational field and we come from an educational field, so we were very interested in how can we gather data that will give us information on how to design later on the interventions. And we borrowed that conceptual framework from our colleagues in science, because they did a lot of research on how complex systems function and what can we do to teach people this kind of functioning. And so especially Cindy Melo-Silva, who is very prominent in the educational field, developed the so-called components, mechanism, phenomena framework of complex systems. And it says that a complex system comprises interacting components at multiple levels. So we tried to translate this framework for the pension system. So in the pension system in Germany, but I think in many other European countries as well, you have two working mechanisms or two components, the pay-as-you-go and the funded subsystem. Second, the complex system functions according to certain mechanisms that occur at different levels. So these are the mode of operation and parameters influencing the pension amount of the two systems that you receive. So that's the kind of functioning you should, when you go, when you retire, you want to have a certain pension amount. And the way how this works, we define that as the mechanisms. And finally, a complex systems with its components and mechanisms behaves not out of the blue, but in a certain context which might change. And that leads to specific phenomena, so we translated that into the macro developments relevant to the functioning of the pension systems. For example, life expectancy, inflation. This is important because then later on you can also borrow on the specific intervention types that they already have in science, and you can see whether they work out in our case in the pension understandings. So, how did we translate this into items for our assessment? We have the two components, pay-as-you-go and funded system. We operationalize it as a private pension system. We have a third pillar, the occupational pension system, but this is so complicated that we would not expect the population to understand it, so we would have definitely no effects, and it works as a funded system as well, so in principle they are similar. Of course the details are very different, but in principle they are similar. Then when it comes to the mechanisms, we had 8 items on the mode of operation for the statutory pension systems, and 4 items that it came out 4 items because we reduced already items in our steps that I mentioned before. For example, a private pension insurance policy guarantees the insured person a monthly pension payment until the end of his or her life, regardless of how old he or she gets, and then people have to say whether this does apply or does not apply, or whether they do not know. Okay, and we had 6 items on parameters influencing the pension amount, and 6 items on the pension amount from the statutory pension system, and the same applies for the private pension system. So, for example, the amount of the last income before retirement has a major influence on the amount of the pensions from the statutory pension insurance scheme. Okay, and our last component, or our last characteristic of a complex system, is the understanding of the factors that could influence the pension system. And this was the most difficult part to construct, because when we discussed with a lot of experts, and a lot of experts told us, oh no, you cannot say in that way, but we need a question that could be judged in a clear manner. So we asked, and this is of course up to discuss, does the rise in inflation rate have a larger long-term effect on the stability of the statutory pension insurance, or on the stability of the private pension insurance, or on both of about the same extent, or neither of them? This was, of course, the most complicated kind of question, but it was also the most interesting one. Okay, so all in all, we really found our 3 factor structure in the data. We had a good psychometric quality at the outset, so it's, of course, you can always be better, but it's quite okay in terms of we did classical test theory as well as item response theory, and we had a very good convergent and divergent validity, as well as good reliability and fairness. So we had no measurement invariance, which is very good. That means that people are not discriminated in a structured way. So it's everybody has the same chance to be put to that test. So, and the gap source resulted as applicable also in our large scale, because we used them in the project that I mentioned before. Some interesting results: the basic pension system understanding in German population is rather low. So we measured basic knowledge with our test. It came out that we measured basic knowledge, but this knowledge is rather low, especially regarding the macro developments, the phenomena. And the German population fares significantly better with regard to the understanding of the private pension system and not the public pension system. So it's interesting then to discuss why this is the case. And young people, that was interesting for us, because we measured also attitudes towards the pension system that I did not mention because it was not in our development. We used already available scales. But young people from generation Y and Z have significantly better knowledge on phenomena, but not on the mechanisms, and they are more interested in solidarity instead of the older generation. So that was something that we found quite interesting. Okay, let me quickly step also in the promotion. We are running projects for all 3 from the pillars of pension literacy, but I want to go into a little bit more depth with this one. which is the pension rally, which we designed to promote pension understanding with a gamified learning environment. How did we do that? Our initial idea was that discussing these systems it requires some kind of participatory design, and we wanted to design them together, as we heard in the morning, together also with the knowledge from the practitioners. So we used teachers and designed them together with them, but we brought into this process also knowledge that we have from learning theory. For example, principles of gamification, but also cognitive theory of multimedia learning or of text processing and of motivation. And we did that in a circle that we call design-based research. Maybe for time reasons I don't go into the depth of this, but the principle is that you start very early with formative evaluation, but this formative evaluation brings you always back to the theory. So you combine the knowledge that you have from theory and bring it into the design decision, but together with practitioners. So basically you use the best practical knowledge and the best theoretical knowledge to design your intervention. Okay, so this is what came out. We had a digital learning environment where we had different parts that are part of the system. So we also included in the design of these parts the specific gaps that we found in our assessment. And it was designed for career starters, so people can go into one of these stations from the pension rally, and each station is built up in a similar way. You have an introduction, you have a main part with learning tasks and with information that are very specific to that specific gap that we found in our assessment, and at the end you have a quiz, which was also part from our questions. And we are still designing this tool, but what we want to do is to have also feedback. So we can use kind of learning prompts or learning analytics to give people feedback where they should go back, and at the end they can have also a score. So this is where we are at the moment. We are still in our last designing phase, and then we want to go, of course, into a more structured evaluation, into more into randomized control trial. And that brings me also to my concluding remarks. We could say that we have aligned our idea, we have an aligned approach of the assessment and the promotion of pension literacy has been developed for one exemplary country, for Germany, and for one exemplary facet of pension literacy, namely for pension understanding. And our next steps, as I said, will be to run RCTs to further investigate the effectiveness of our learning interventions, not only the pension rally, but also the season app and our other game-based learning arrangement. The adaptation of the test to young people, this was a test for the population, but now we are running a survey for young people where we changed the questions in order to be comprehensible for the young people. We tested it out, and at Monday we will have the first results from the pre-tests, and I'm really looking forward to have them. Of course, we will further develop the test with regard to the other pillars, retirement planning and pension-related financial decision-making. And of course, in the long run, when we have a developed test, we would be also interested in doing some comparative research with other countries, because I think some more principal aspects would work out. Maybe other aspects are more context and country-specific, and then they need other tests, of course, but it would be interesting to find out what is the parallels between the countries. So, yeah, I will end up with thank you, of course, and with an invitation also to our conference. Yeah, thanks for the attention.